Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine.
Welcome, everyone, to Morning Magazine for this March 30th, 2021. You have your host, James J. Malouf here. And today's, in the entire hour, we're going to be spending with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Shane Blazer. Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
We also have with us the Timber Professionals Cooperative. We have Dennis Schinick with us. Dennis, good morning.
Good morning.
And we have Henry Scheinbeck with us. Scheinebeck. Oh, get close?
You're close.
I'm close. All right. Remember what I said. Mine's Malouf. You guys can mispronounce that all you want. Dennis, Henry, really appreciate both of you being with us today. And Mayor, as always, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for being with us. We have a lot to get into, but first, before we do that, I wanted to see how everybody's holding up. How are you, Mayor? How's everybody in your camp doing?
We're doing good.
Good to hear.
Day by day, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Dennis, how about you? How's everybody holding up on your end?
Well, it's been a struggle through the winter, and it's going to get worse coming spring. But tell you what, I've always been an optimist, and I like to try to put the best construction on everything, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're all about.
It's good to hear. We need more of that, Dennis. That's good to hear. Henry, how about you? How's everybody holding up?
Hey, we're doing really good. You know, I kid around a lot of times. You know that job security, from my perspective, is good because issues just keep on coming. But
yeah.
You know, we keep growing and learning and, figuring out how to deal with things and figuring out a better way to do things, really.
Yeah, problem solving is a big reason why we're meeting today and talking together. So that's an interesting point and a great way to set us up for the rest of the interview here. Nice job, Henry. And while we're kind of on that, I'd like to get to know you guys a little bit, hear a little bit about you. We already know Shane. We've met him a bunch.
Sorry.
I'm glad.
Dennis, can you tell me a little bit about your background and where you're coming from on this subject?
Sure. Well, I've been a logger for over 40 years. Actually have delivered wood to this mill here in Wisconsin Rapids for, well, a little over 40 years, except the last year.
Yeah.
And I'm very passionate about what I do. I've actually been, I've won a lot of national, local, state, national, and actually a global award for the work I do in forest activism. You know, it's really a passion of mine. Our forest, outdoors is really a passion of mine. And of course, managing our forest comes right along with that. And so that's really, as I grew up, we had kind of a small dairy farm as well, but my dad worked at the paper mill in Rhinelander, and we logged part-time, and I just kind of took off with that after high school, and I just the more I did it, the more I fell in love with it. And but it's always been a challenge, as you alluded to, the fact that we have to, in our industry, it's always been changing. Nothing ever stays the same for more than, it seems sometimes more than a day. So we always have to be ready to adapt to what our next problem is. And then last summer, of course, we got hit with probably one of the biggest problems that we have to problem solve. Yeah. In my career. So that's what we're here. That's why we're doing what we're doing, to get this ball rolling.
I appreciate you sharing that, Dennis, and really appreciate the work that you do and caring about that. And that it's an important subject and one that I feel like we could probably bring you in on your own sometime to talk about. That'd be really interesting.
Well, for me, it's never been. As the process evolves, you always get different people hitting you with different ideas, what they think about what you're doing, right? Yeah. And, I've had comments made to me, oh, you're doing this all for yourself and your own gain. It's like, folks, this is nothing about me. Yeah. This is all about all of us. The whole goal is the big picture in this. Right. And, there's...
It affects all of us, and it
does.
It's kind of interesting because one of the things that I pulled on when I was doing research for this and thinking about questions for you guys and that sort of thing is the storm that we had happen a couple of years ago now, and it feels like it was 5 years ago when it really wasn't, but it knocked down so many of our trees. And me and the mayor and other people have talked about replanting trees and that sort of thing and how important trees are in general. They I don't want to get into a science lecture here, but they give off oxygen. It's a little little important to us. That is kind of a key thing here. But it's such a trickle-down effect from that. You just start there, and there's so many things that are why it's so important to us, that industry, and having some awareness to it and everything. So some great work, Dennis. That's good to hear. Henry, how about yourself? What brings you into this co-op, and can you tell us a little bit about your background?
So I'm a third-generation logger, self-employed for 32 years. My wife and I, we did logging and trucking, that type of thing. And about 2008, I was on the board of directors for Great Lakes Timber Professional Association, and lo and behold, I end up being the executive director for that association. And so we represent about 1,000 members in Wisconsin and Michigan, and we also do another group that's part of our organization is FISTA, Forest Industry Safety Training Alliance, and all the loggers that do their certification training basically go through that program. In order to get a contract, with a mill, you have to go through certification because the mills all need certified fiber to sell their product. And so basically what I do now is I represent folks like Dennis in a more of a political setting, and we're engaged in all kinds of things, all kinds of laws and different activities that have to do with the forest industry. And a lot of families like Dennis's is basically a timber family.
Yeah.
I mean, they're family-run businesses.
Yeah.
A lot of our members are third, fourth, and fifth generations, which brings us back to the point we've never run out of trees.
Yeah.
Even during the cutover, we didn't actually run out of timber. They went back after they cut the pine, and there was a huge demand for that. That's how Chicago, Minneapolis, they were all built on that lumber. And, all of a sudden it kind of got to the point, well, is this sustainable? And obviously we learn every day, right?
Yeah.
From things that we've done. We try not to repeat things and that type of thing, but forest management is so important, number 2 industry in this state.
Yeah.
And losing this mill is going to have an impact because Wisconsin was the number 1 paper-making state in the union. And I think we're going to try to maintain that and bring it back. And for us to be involved in this, it's really about the forest, right?
Yeah.
One thing we can all agree on, doesn't matter if you're environmentalist or whatever you are, it's all about the trees.
Yeah.
If we don't have the trees, the rest of what we do simply doesn't matter. Right? It's just that simple.
Yeah.
You have to start out, well, how do we maintain the trees? Well, it's just like a garden. You have to make sure you manage it. The reason we have such great forests in this state is because of the management that's taken place. I mean, we're not California.
Right.
Their forests are obviously overgrown in a lot of areas, and trees suck a lot of water. And if you go back through history, and when they had 70, 80 of those big trees, because they'll take about 300 gallons a day of water, and when that gets crowded, there's not enough water. That opens the forest up to insect and disease. We've seen a lot of invasives in this state over the last few years, and that the bugs can get into the tree because they're not healthy. So forest health for us, maintaining a good forest and having access to that forest for management is really what our organization is about, and making sure that the industry can stay vibrant and all that. Because if we lose one part of that whole circle of life, we lose it all.
It's so when we talk about endangered species, this comes up from time to time, where if you take one animal out of the food chain, it affects the whole chain. It is very similar to this with this industry, that where if we didn't have trees, and I know that sounds silly to maybe some people and everything, but that's not that far-fetched of a thing. If we don't have that, that's a huge part of our chain here. That's a big thing missing. It's not just the economy and the economic issues and things like that it brings, but there's so many levels to it and everything. So it is an important thing to be focusing on, and it's a really interesting field that you're in there. I find that very interesting. I'd love to ask you more questions about that, but we have other things to talk about, sir. Both of you guys, I want to drill both 30 questions, follow-up questions for both of you that have nothing to do with what we're talking about today. So just another time we'll do that. But I appreciate the work that you guys are doing for our farms, our this industry, I should say. And why we're together today is to talk about the Timber Professionals Cooperative. And Dennis, as the president of this, I'd like to kind of get to why this group was formed and what you guys are doing. And those are two big questions right there. So we'll take our time with both of those. And Henry, I'll probably ask your your 2 cents about that too. But Dennis, to start with you.
Well, Henry always has more than 2 cents to offer, let me tell you.
We'll give Henry some time. We'll make sure there's time in the show, yeah.
Well, it's funny. So I also serve on the board, the FISTA board as well with Henry. And we had a board meeting.
Bosses, in other words.
So we had a FISTA board meeting the day after that Verso announced the closing. Of course, and understand, for us, the closing was June 9th.
Right.
I got a call at 9 o'clock in the morning, said I'm all done hauling wood there. So that's how it affected me directly, immediately, me and a lot of others.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, of course, once the initial shock sets in, then it's scrambled, what do we do next? And so after the FISTA board meeting that night, I was sitting alongside of Henry, and we have another gentleman that's actually out in the hall today with us. Yeah. That's been very instrumental with this. We all kind of said, we just got to do something about this.
Yeah.
And it kind of started from there. So with the Great Lakes Timber Professionals, we have seven regions in Wisconsin. We have 4 in Wisconsin and 3 in Michigan. And so we just started pulling the regions together. And so we went to each region individually, brought folks together, and through those meetings kind of laid out the platform of where we want to head with this. We also have one of the nation's top co-op specialists that lives in Stevens Point, actually. Margaret Ball got on board with us as well.
Margaret, yes.
So Margaret's been absolutely instrumental with this.
I've heard great things about her, yeah.
And you'll hear more from us. So as we slowly, the team started to form, we got our steering committee together. Yeah. Out of the steering committee came the board, the Timber Professionals board, and we've just kind of been running steps by steps with that. I'm a faithful guy. I think a lot of us are that work together, and as this started to form, it's funny how God puts all those pieces together for you. You don't know how we don't know what we were doing here, but as it came on, pieces and more folks with more expertise started to fall in and lay the layers on top of layers, and actually it's been quite an amazing journey for myself to be a part of it. But the whole goal, obviously, is to put us all back to work, right?
Right.
And first and foremost, we've always for years we've always talked about a healthy forest, and with healthy forest comes managing those forests. You can't do it without managing them.
Right.
So that became right on top of the plate, of the concerns here is, first of all, our forests aren't going to be managed. Second of all, the trickle-down economics that come with us, jobs, economy, and it's just amazing how big that becomes then once you put all that together.
Yeah, how many lives are affected by all of that? That's something that we've been kind of talking about on the air a lot and everything, but it's interesting what you started with there of how long that you guys have been dealing with this subject and how long it's been on your plate and everything, where it's kind of became more of a well-known city story here and everything a little bit after that, I would say. Whereas for you guys, it's almost been we're getting on a year now where this has been the number one thing on your plate every day almost.
Well, it never leaves your mind. Understand something. We're just common people. I've never went to college. Went right out of high school into logging. I started before I graduated logging, and to the point where we've got several $1 million invested here, and that's just little old us. There's no big corporation backing that with us. Yeah. And of course comes with the families of what those machines support. The truckers that supports right on down the line, the food stores, the fuel lines, you name it, the parts guys, they're all being severely affected. But understand the point that, we don't have this big union backing us. We don't have this big corporate thing backing us. We're out here on our own fighting this battle. And I say that, and I didn't mean to say that we're on our own, because like I said, there's a lot of people that really want this to happen.
I appreciate that last part you added there, but I agree with you, though, and I think most of us understand, or most of us are on the same side of this, where we're like, yeah, you guys are fighting this on your own almost. It is nice that you have some sources here and everything, but it's part of the reason why when Henry was describing what he does, I found so important, and I honestly didn't know that you did that kind of work, Henry, and I'm so proud and happy that there is somebody doing that, because you're right. I mean, whether it's a union or it's a big conglomerate or something like that, it is so easy to just kind of, Walmart, and we just give it a face. It's almost his first and last name, is Walmart. It's like a thing. But with certain things like this, there's, it's many voices without anybody really at the head, anybody to really fight for them, anybody to speak up for them. It's great to have people like Henry, like people like this that are doing that kind of thing, but that can't be lost in the shuffle here with what we're talking about. This is something that is taking a lot of fight from a lot of people, and it's not something that's necessarily getting a national attention that it should.
Well, let me put it this way. You're right, exactly. And I scratch my head daily of why?
Yeah.
Why isn't? Yeah. Because this is not. It's not like a gas station that went out. Where the only people affected by that are the people that work there. Everybody else can go to another gas station.
Right.
It's not the case with this.
No.
This affects Wisconsin Rapids community. It affects Wisconsin.
Right.
The whole of Wisconsin by that mill being out. And that's what I cannot get my mind around, is the fact that more, and they're coming, but the fact that people just don't jump onto this and go, wow, this is, we need to get this done.
It's hopefully one of the things we'll be able to do today.
That'd be
is
awesome.
Get some more soldiers behind this and everything. But it is a weird thing to me. I'm with you on this, because again, when Pam told me that you guys are going to be coming in today and everything, I was like, okay, this is going to be a good one. And I like to listen. I like to talk to listeners, people out there in our community, and find out questions that they might have for you guys and that sort of thing. And it was staggering to me, the amount of people that were kind of, for one, weren't sure of what you guys were doing, or that it was still an issue. And I'm like, well, have you heard otherwise? Because I haven't heard that the mill's like got a circus going on over there or anything. I mean, it's still pretty empty from what I understand. It's still a pretty big issue. But even in this town, where you would think nobody would have it as the top of their head more than them. But I think that we have so many people. First off, we have a lot of things going on in the world. We all understand that. Yep. But for the people that were not directly affected by that mill closing down, we're still reaching them. We're still trying to get to them to make sure that they realize this affects you too. And you may not think it does. Maybe you never had any connection to the mill whatsoever, so you think it doesn't affect you. But to Dennis's point before, this is a trickle-down thing. Think if Aaron Rodgers wasn't playing for the Packers. All right. Think if the Packers don't have an Aaron Rodgers there. You don't have somebody to bring people in. Maybe a better example is when LeBron James left Cleveland. It didn't just affect the Cleveland Cavaliers. It affected the people that sold T-shirts outside that building, the grocery stores that were near there, the bars that are around there. It affects everything. It is a trickle-down effect. This is exactly like that. This mill shutting down doesn't just affect mill workers. It affects every industry, literally every industry in this community.
Private landowners with timber to sell that have nowhere to sell their timber to.
Well, even importantly, when I first heard about this, I selfishly thought Wisconsin Rapids, and the people that work here. And it wasn't until I met Henry and Dennis what a wide range effect that it has on the state economy. Even in government, all the county-owned forest. Mm-hmm. They're selling timber. And there's quite a few, 13, 14 counties? Or
30.
29.
Well,
30
wow.
county forests out there.
So, and those counties rely on that revenue on that sale of that timber. And if there's no place to take that timber, they're not able to sell that and supplement their budgets.
Sorry, go ahead. Did you have something?
So, basically, there's 30 county forests out there. Those county forests generate roughly somewhere always between $30 and $40 million for their local units of government. If they didn't generate that income, that would be more burden on the taxpayers in another way, shape, or form, because that timber, and the county forests manage about 2.4 million acres, and they're an example of how, really, in our opinion, how things should be done. The state of Wisconsin does a good job with their lands. We're getting a lot better at the federal forest. Managing those properties again and stuff, but that's the impact that they have. And some of those county forests sold roughly 30% of their timber went to this mill. and
that's a big number.
Went to the Duluth mill because Ursul shut down Duluth and Rapids at the same time. So together, that's roughly 2 million tons of wood that now has no home.
Yeah.
And that's a big number.
Those are great numbers to bring to us, Henry. And I think you hit on a point right before that's really important, too, is the tax implication. Because whatever holdouts we have out there are people who aren't paying attention to the subject. I think we just got them. As soon as you bring up taxes, that catches most people's ears and everything. So that is an important note of this, too. There are so many layers to this that I want to make sure we hit on and everything. So when it comes to those fringe people that don't seem to be paying attention to this subject and that sort of thing, is there anything we haven't kind of touched on in this conversation already? Just starting off of why we're doing this and why this co-op has been brought together that we haven't touched on. Because I don't want to leave anything out. I really appreciate that last part you brought up there about the taxes, because that's something that I don't think a lot of people would have thought of. To your point, Mayor, I immediately thought of the impact it had on our city in this area, and it took me a couple of days to think about central Wisconsin, and then it took me about a month or two at least to start thinking about the larger impact on the state, the Midwest, going forward there. So that's an important thing that I don't think a lot of us are thinking about either. And I appreciate the honesty there with that, because that's something I can relate to.
Well, I think, part of it is because of the fact that, like I had said earlier, that it affected me and others like me that day.
Yeah.
Immediately. But the rest of the chain, and through things that the government did to soften the blow of COVID, in putting money into people's hands, kind of lessened the blow on other folks as it went down the line. So those effects really aren't even going to be seen. We've been saying for quite some time, you're not going to see this really until this summer, into next fall, before it really starts to hit home, the impact of that. Because, that COVID relief, I'll calm my comments on that down a little bit, but the COVID relief that has been given to folks has kind of helped soften that to a lot of them. The extra monies that for unemployment folks, that all has to do with the fact that this hasn't really come home to roost yet. But we'd love to put it back to work before it does.
Well, and we're going to get into that when we come back from break. I'd like to kind of touch on that because we've explained a bit of why we've gotten together here and everything. We're going to talk about, when we come back, we'll talk about the work that's being done right now to try to help with that and thinking ahead. We appreciate you both being with us. Again, we have Dennis and Henry with us from the Timber Professionals Cooperative and Mayor Shane Blazer with us as well on Morning Magazine. We'll come back with more in just a moment right here on AM 1320 WFHR. It's Ray of Morning Magazine. We're joined by Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Shane Blazer. We also have Dennis and Henry, representatives from the Timber Professionals Cooperative with us. And again, thank you all for joining us today, gentlemen. There is another co-op, the Consolidated Co-op, that is a part of this as well, from what I understand. Can we touch on that for a second? Dennis, would you want to?
Sure, I can.
I was going to put Henry on the spot, and I'm like, well, Dennis is the president, so maybe I should put Dennis on the spot.
That's okay.
Good choice.
Thank you.
Well, we'll see. We'll see in a minute, right? So really, the Timber Professionals Co-op was formed first, and initially we really felt that we took the initiative on it, plain and simple. We felt that we saw the need, and we decided to run with it. Like I said, we got our 7 regions together and formed that. But we all the time knew that really once we had Verso Mill here in Rapids up and coming to the forefront, we knew that we wanted to form a multi-stakeholder cooperative, and that's really what the Consolidated Co-op is all about. Now, that is a newly formed, as of a week ago, cooperative that officially formed as of a week ago. And the whole purpose of the multi-stakeholder is to get everyone involved because, like we said before, this isn't just about me. This is about all of us. And that's where the multi-stakeholder cooperative comes into play.
Okay.
That way we can bring the landowners. The fact is, on our board, the Consolidated Co-op's board of directors sits Rebecca Lutke, who is head of the County Forest Association. So that brings those county forests into play. And that's the whole purpose of the multi-stakeholders, just what it says. Everyone with a stake in what's happening here can be involved. And that's the whole thought in forming the Consolidated Cooperative. And that's really the folks that's going to take over.
If I'm an industry that's not a part of this cooperative yet, can I still be a part of it? Can I join something like this? Because as we're talking about this subject, I imagine that there's people listening and industries listening that are realizing, wait a minute, this is affecting me too.
Right.
I should be in on this. I should be helping with this. Or more voices the better. More power. More people the better, kind of thing.
Right. And so there are so in our bylaws and such and. There are certain criteria you have to fall into to be able to be a member. Mm-hmm. So we'll have members and we'll have investors.
I see.
And so no matter who you are, in one way, if this is important to you, you'll be able to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. But those bylaws and such are still being formed as to exactly how it all financially works out, which we can't really talk about today. But we'll be able to answer some of those questions. We could get you in touch with our administrative office.
Sure. We'll give that information before we wrap up today. But that's just an interesting thing, and just appreciate that, and I appreciate so many different businesses, different people getting involved in this. This should not be something that the timber industry or forest industry is fighting on their own. This is something that so many of us should be behind and everything. We've kind of explained why the co-op has been brought together. We've gotten into the details of that. I would like to touch on what's being done. The work that you guys are doing now, what we're doing and what we're going to be looking to going forward here and everything. Henry, can you touch on a little bit of that for me?
Yeah, so like Dennis said, the formation of the Consolidated Cooperative took place officially. They're recognized by the state now. So during the process of forming the bylaws, you have to talk about, how do you do things financially, where you're looking to get the funding for the project, that type of thing. And still really working on bringing all the parties together, because when you look at the jobs that were there, those are high quality jobs at the mill. They're high quality jobs in the woods.
Yeah.
These guys are trained to do what they do, and the guys that are doing the work on the ground make that final decision as to what tree gets cut and how that's going to impact wildlife that you brought up earlier. Mm-hmm. Because we're all about wildlife. I mean, everybody in this state is about wildlife, either for hunting and viewing or bird watching, whatever it is, having that habitat, maintaining all that. So bringing all those people in and trying to really get that quality of life back that people are used to. I know there's other jobs out there, but when you look at the whole paper industry, and it kind of brings it back to that kind of this social gathering. Mm-hmm. And it's not, in our opinion, it's not just the union that's formed that does that. It's this whole community of people that should be doing that.
Yeah.
I made a lot of trips down here when I was hauling wood down to Consolidated, which is, by the way, why it's called the Consolidated Cooperative, because Consolidated has a very good connotation to a lot of us that have a lot of history here. And I remember talking to some of the folks at the mill, and they really didn't realize where the wood came from. And, there's other organizations out there that don't really hold tree management and forest management in the high regard that we do. Problem is, we can prove our case because we've never run out of trees, and we don't want to run out of trees. That's why we've got 4th, 5th, and 6th generation loggers out here, right?
Right.
And that's why a facility like this is able to keep going, because the raw material keeps growing. And so it's really important that we continue down that path. And so Consolidated Cooperative is bringing those groups together. Like I said, they're forming their bylaws. They're doing, the articles of incorporation have been formed. We have to figure out how the financing is going to happen and that type of thing, and what that all involves. So
there's a lot of logistics still getting worked out.
Yeah, there's a lot of logistics being worked out yet, because this has not been done at this level.
Right.
Ever.
Anywhere.
That we're aware of. And we're kind of following this, what's called a Boysaco example that was in Quebec, Canada. And that Boysaco example was kind of a similar situation. A mill was bought and sold 3 times, a sawmill. Finally, the workers and the forest workers got together with the community, and they purchased the mill. And that happened in 1985, and they now have 5 ancillary businesses plus that going. So a very, very successful model. And that's, so working out all those details is really what's happening right now.
It takes a bit to do that.
So, but really, the long and the short of it is the consolidated co-op is formed really to eventually buy the mill. That's the intent,
right?
And to put folks back to work, and it really is that cooperative effort by all of us that's going to get that done. We recognize the fact that we can't do it alone, and the fact is, when everyone has a stake in what's going on, and everyone has a little bit of knowledge of what everybody else's role in this, it becomes theoretically quite a bit easier.
Yeah. Yes.
Once we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
That's really the whole concept of this cooperative that really, to me, was like so exciting.
There's nobody who says, I've got to move, I don't need any help. Nobody,
there you go.
I'll move the couch by myself. Don't worry, guys, I got this. Everything is easier with an extra set of hands. It's no different with something like this. It's also something that I think is noteworthy that, I came across this when I first moved to this city, and we had a field trip, and we go through the mill and everything and check it out, and I get to, talking to some people there just as a kid and realize what a family business this can be and a family career this can be. And we think about that with our farmers all the time, that is a handed-down industry and that sort of thing. I don't know if enough people think about that with this industry. And I bring that up because it's nothing for us nowadays to hear that our farmers need help, that our farmers need attention, and rightfully so. That should be in people's minds, and we should think of that. That certainly should be up there. But we have enough room in our hearts and our minds to have more than one thing up at the top of our brains. And this industry and this cause is something that should be right there with it. The two industries are lean on each other from quite a few ways. And again, getting back to the fact that the trickle-down thing, well, there's also a bleeding into kind of thing where there's so many industries that are affected by other industries. And these are two worlds that both need our attention nowadays. And I think we can have enough in our brains to be able to pay attention to all these different subjects.
Well, it's funny how ag kind of sustains you with food and that type of thing, right? That it replenishes our body with nutrients. But there's very little that you can ask me about the forest that you don't touch every day as well.
Right. Yeah.
Everything in your life, every day, that you've been touched by the forest products industry.
I'm glad you said it that way too, Dennis. That's a great point to make. Very well said. Especially because one of the things that when this first came up as a topic, the mill first closed and it's first hitting everybody, and we're all dealing with that initial shock. One of the first comparisons I saw by some news outlets and different people was, when the coal industry in West Virginia and that sort of thing, and wanting to immediately have this comp, and we do this all the time nowadays, where we've got to compare this athlete to this athlete or that kind of thing, and really, it's like any of these things, there is no comparison. There might be one or two little things you can connect, but there is no connection to the coal industry to the timber industry. The coal industry is an industry that is seeing the last days of. It is in the dinosaur steps and everything. While there is still some need for it, it is one of those things that is dying down more and more as we go forward here. The timber industry is not dying down. The timber industry is very healthy and still very needed and very important. It is apples and oranges if there ever was. So it's something that I thought we wouldn't have to address today, but talking to some of our listeners, it is still something. Oh, why are they even worrying about that industry? I heard that industry is dying. No, the timber industry is very healthy. It's very, and I can give you 20 examples right now of why it's still a very vital and important thing. It feels silly to have to say that out loud, but it is something apparently that we have to address.
And that's kind of been a story that we've been trying to tell for a lot of years. And the fact that we have a great story, nobody's listening. On a funny, I hope it's kind of a funny note here, but last spring when COVID hit, what was the biggest shortage? Toilet paper, right?
Right.
And I thought to myself, here you are. You spend all this time trying to get the great story of forest industry out there, and now people are going to remind you every time they sit down and go to the bathroom. they're going to think of you. It's like, I don't know if I want to be thought of that way.
Right.
But
we really don't have synthetic toilet paper.
But I mean, it's just a small.
We got to take the last where we can get them. Absolutely, and it's not only hilarious, but it is an interesting point. It also speaks to kind of what we're getting at here, where people. we don't pay attention to something like this until it is in necessity,
Right.
and especially when you're in that position, and you realize how important the timber industry is then. But it also hopefully brings the awareness to people of why we are trying to keep that, why we are looking to do this, why not only this co-op is brought and these other co-ops have been brought together and formed, but what the work that you guys are doing and why it's so important. And that kind of brings us back to that of right now we're in the stages of these co-ops being formed and different things like that. But they're being formed to hopefully be able to purchase the mill or hopefully be able to put people back to work. And I know that at the end of the day, that is the big thing of what a lot of people are listening for. When are people going back to work, or where are jobs coming from, and that sort of thing. Those are always the big two ones that are going to be coming up. And that's really something that you can take from this conversation. But that is a big part of where we're going with all of this. That I think you'd probably say, right, Dennis?
Yeah.
It's a big part of this. The end game, I should say.
The end game, the big picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're in it for the long haul. We're looking for that need family type of ownership where this is, 50, 100 year type of an ownership, because it's been pretty tough on a lot of our members to see these mills bought and sold, every 5 to 7 years, because there's no security there. And financial institutions would love us to have security. I mean, these guys are purchasing for, you're looking at $1.2 million for 2 pieces of equipment. And there's reasons why we're using that type of equipment now, because of safety reasons and how do you treat the forest, that type of thing, low ground pressure footprint on the forest and no rutting and different things like that, and doing different types of forest management. So, having that long-term thinking is really a big part of this, and one of the reasons why we keep pushing forward, and I can tell you there's a lot of plates spinning in the air right now, because you have to be looking at product. How, what can you manufacture that's going to be long term? Right. Where are those market trends going? All those kind of things. There's just so many things that are at play right now, because again, we're thinking long term here.
There are 2 major headlines a couple of them that should come out of this interview, and I think one of them is that the idea that we're not just looking to put a Band-Aid on this, or just what can we do for the next month to take care of us and everything, that you guys are thinking big picture, you're thinking long term, you're thinking generationally, which that's so important, and that is that foresight. We need more of that in the world, and that's really cool to hear. I hope people take that from this, but also the idea that of turning this into, this hits me a little bit as a Chicago fan to say this, but to me, the coolest thing in sports is the Green Bay Packers and what they have, and that team is never going anywhere. I remember being a little kid and hearing of the story of the Bears possibly moving to Gary, Indiana, and as a little kid being scared to death of that. Green Bay fans will never have to worry about that, because in all seriousness, that's the way sports franchises should be run. They should be owned by the city, and the city should be able to say what they want to do with that team, not some Jerry Jones guy sitting there with $1 billion or whatever. I think that's the coolest thing in sports, to be honest with you. Sure. And I love that idea. I love that that's where you're going with this, that we're looking at doing something similar like that with the mill, where we want it to be, people owned and not just conglomerate owned, that kind of thing. I think that plays in very well with looking at big picture here and looking at the generational health there.
Yeah, I mean, they shouldn't have to worry about what their next market is going to be or where they're going to sell. And the worker in the mill shouldn't have to worry about where am I going to get my next dollar from. Mm-hmm. They should be able to spend that time off with their family and thinking about family things and how do they act as a family, and being able to fish and take a vacation, that type of thing. And speaking of that, I was fortunate enough last week to spend some time with the grandchildren down in Nashville, and nice. we went into a restaurant after we did the Redneck Comedy Tour, and lo and behold, on the wall, all these Green Bay Packers pictures on the wall, and the tables and we're in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
Home of the Titans.
Mm-hmm.
It was all about the Packers. And so, it was like, hey, we're home, how do we get back? Click our heels, we're back in Wisconsin or what,
So there's one other thing that I keep that has been popping up in my head here a little bit too when we're talking about this, and it came up when you guys were explaining about the co-op and it coming together and the things that are still being done with these things, with the co-op and the bylaws and that sort of stuff. And it's something that I know is really tough for everybody right now, and me included. Being patient with this, that we have to be smart with this. And I imagine that as tough as it is for maybe some of the listeners out there to be patient in that, it's not tougher on anybody than you three. And you guys, and the people that you work with, and your staffs, and that sort of thing. You guys have had to be more patient than anybody. But it is important that we are with this because we cannot rush this kind of thing. This isn't something where we can that we can have a GoFundMe campaign or something like that, and it's going to take care of all of our problems or something like that. Like, this is something that if we want to make this work and we want to do this right, we've got to take our time with it. We have to be patient. We have to, when we're talking about making this a generational thing, when we're talking about this being owned by somebody, more local and not a conglomerate, well, that takes work. That takes patience. That's something I think that we also have to take from this conversation.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I'm typically not a very patient guy.
I hear you.
Well, and, and when you own, like for myself, I can make decisions and we can change and about how I do business and that kind of stuff, and I've got control over that. That's one of the biggest things I had to rear back my horns back in, is the fact that I don't have control over this. Yeah. But the great part about this learning experience for me has been the folks that I've been surrounded by, and I'm starting to make this sound like me. It's really not about me. It's all about this group of folks that have just really come together, and I often describe it as a snowball. When that snowball is little, it's easy to kick across the yard, but as that grows in size, it almost becomes impossible to move at all, and that's kind of where we're at with this. It's just like that snowball's gotten so big that it just takes so long to get across the yard, and you're exactly right, James. I mean, we need to be, patience is a big thing. We need to make sure we've got this right.
There's nothing I despise more than talking about myself, Dennis. I hear you, but it's important we do that. I'm glad that you're sharing things the way you are, because you'd be surprised how many people relate to that, and that's why I do it, even though I don't want to. I hear you.
Well, I don't mean to.
I know what you mean. But I appreciate that you are, because that is the way we get people to care about this. That they are going to relate to something you're saying, and that's how we get people bringing in, and we get more and more people behind this subject and everything.
I'm just me.
Yeah.
But it's a diverse group, though. It's not just loggers doing this. This is
right.
This is a very diverse group.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good point.
Yeah, it is a really good point. I'd like to speak to that a little bit when we come back. We have one more break to take. We're going to do that, and we'll come back, and we'll wrap things up with Morning Magazine on AM 1320 WFHR. We have Morning Magazine wrapping up the hour with our friends from the Timber Professionals Cooperative, and, of course, our mayor, Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Shane Blazer, with us. We were talking about this a little bit in the pregame here and in the off-air just now, but you've had contact with the sellers a bit here, Dennis, and that side, and I know that there's a lot of details in this conversation that we can't necessarily get to too hardcore details to, and I think most of our audience is going to understand the legalities and that sort of thing. But with that being said, what kind of can you tell us, Dennis, in a generic sort of way?
Sure. Just the fact that we have had conversation with the folks who have been hired by Verso to sell the mill for them, and actually had a very good conversation with them, and they've been very supportive of us as well, and patient with us, because they realize that we're doing something that's never been done as well, and I think I would say that they've seen the value in what we're trying to do as well. So it's been going very well to this point with
good to
them.
Hear.
So it's important that folks understand that so many plates are in the air, and we're juggling them all at the same time. And but that is one of the plates. Right. That we've actually had conversation with those folks, and
that the lines of communication are open.
Absolutely.
I think that is a really big thing to take from this, and it's important to note. And it doesn't necessarily have to be. I think that we're so quick to, especially with this 24-hour news cycle that we've been all in for the last 20 years. I think that we're so quick. Well, who's the villain? Who's the bad guy here? Who can I point the finger at? Who can I blame all my problems on? And in a situation like this, there necessarily isn't a bad guy. I mean, it's easy to say Verso's the jerk or whatever and everything, and I've said that, and I have no problem saying it. But at the same time, it doesn't do us any good to have a bad guy here. This isn't a comic book. This is real life, and often, more times than not, there isn't a good guy or a bad guy. It's just life. It's just what's going on.
So you just brought up the exact point that we've kind of been circling around here of the fact of what this co-op brings. You're right. We can't look at Verso and go, oh, those idiots, or what are they? No, they made a business decision to do what they did there, and it's up to us to react of how we want to deal with it. And this is how we're doing that. Yeah. And by the multi-stakeholder cooperative being formed and having all the different players involved, that's how we make it a long-term thing. Right? It's not, those decisions aren't made in a boardroom somewhere by folks who are really not have much to do with the industry. Right. Those decisions are going to be made in a boardroom full of people that have absolutely everything to do with what's going on here.
And that's the way it should be. That's an important part of this.
That's how we feel.
I think that every industry should be taking a note from that, that having more of that kind of that personal touch and people that actually know what the industry is and going on. And that's a good point to bring up. I appreciate that because to me it's not to say I'm not giving like Verso a break here. I'm not saying that I agree with what they did or anything like that. But what I think is what good does it do to put our energy into blaming and all this when there's work to be done? I mean, there'll be time to blame.
Hallelujah.
We've got too many people that need us right now.
So are we talking on national weather level here?
Yes, absolutely.
But I mean, you just made a great statement for the nation.
It's true.
Absolutely true.
I talk to my students about this all the time. That there are plenty of different groups. My whole life I have taken anti-Semitic talk. I have taken this kind of talk, this and this. And the one thing I was raised on, I know it hurts, Jimmy. Take that, use that as fuel, and do something with it. Do some good with it. Do something with it. Bring some awareness to it, and that kind of thing. Every one of us nowadays have that personal responsibility of, do you want to be a victim or do you want to be in action? Do you want to do some work? Because there's work to be done. And again, it doesn't mean that you give a break to the jerk there or the bad guy there, but it also doesn't do us any good to just spend all day pointing the finger and complaining.
So negative breeds negative, right?
Yes,
positive
absolutely.
Breeds positive.
Absolutely.
And that's what we go on, is like, you be positive.
Yes. Yeah.
And you just brought up a really good point. Loggers are problem solvers. We went from a cross-cut and an axe that I cut my first load of wood with to a highly mechanized machine that, I mean, a lot of us could take a computer out of that thing and find that little diode that no longer works and replace that and go back to work. That's the technology that's out there. So how did we get from a cross-cut and an axe to a harvester to having that technology where you can tell you where to cut the length to get the highest value out of that piece of wood, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably the best way to explain why Timber Professionals Cooperative took off the way it did, because they saw a problem, they're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? And do their best to fix it and bring everybody to the table. So everybody can gain equally.
Henry,
everybody shares in the spoils as well.
Incredibly good comp right there. It's a great way to compare this, and it also speaks to not only why this is moving the way it is and stuff, but something I feel like, again, every industry can take a little piece of and everything. You guys are problem solvers. It's what you do. It's part of the job that you sign up for and everything, and that is part of the reason why this group and this co-op and these things our work is getting done. And again, it takes some patience from us, but it is happening, and it is going to be going forward here. The work is going to be done because you got hard workers at this. That is appreciated, and something I think we can all take a little piece of. Before we let you guys go, as we wrap up here, if people have follow-up questions, if people want to know more about this, where can they go? How can they find that out?
Well, I guess, simple questions, I can give you my number.
Sure. If you don't mind, I appreciate that.
I can say it over the radio here. It's 715-550-1602. My name's Dennis.
Okay.
And typically, and for me, my hours never stop. They never have, and they probably never will.
Okay.
So call me anytime, day or night. But we do have an administrative office as well. And Henry, I think you've got that number.
Yep, and that number is 906-875-3720.
All right, and that was 906 area code?
Yep.
Okay, I want to repeat that for people during Over the
And
Back
that'll be
Fence
Don.
today.
Don Peterson will
Don.
be the guy you want to talk to there.
We appreciate you, Don, and really appreciate you, Henry. Appreciate you, Dennis. Merritt, it's always good to see you. Thanks for being with us, Shane. And thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, certainly, but more importantly, thank you for the work that you're doing for our state, for our industries, for all of us. I really do appreciate it.
I just thank God for the ability.
We appreciate you guys, and keep up the great work, and we'll talk again real soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, James.